Okay, today I'm going to be dropping in on the Myopic Times to discuss a disagreement that he and I had earlier this week about medical consent. So I'm going to change my stream title just a second. Okay, there we go. And now I'm going to jump in.
Hello, Cricket.
Hello, hello. Okay, so for anybody who's listening to this, I want to give a kind of a brief synopsis of where we're at and what I intend to be talking about today.
All right.
Okay, so you and I earlier in this week had a conversation where um I mean, I guess we had like a little bit of a contentious conversation actually, which is funny because like looking back on it, I bet our positions are probably not actually that far apart. But this started with the question of like, what if they came up with a cure for autism, basically, right? And it was like, um, what like who gets it's this a little bit wild hypothetical scenario where an adult can just go get a medical procedure and then just walk out of the hospital no longer being autistic, and we had this disagreement about who's going to get this treatment and who doesn't, and then we just ended up on all these tangents about like veganism and whether or not medical decisions should be based on on the likelihood of the patient committing crimes in the future, and it got a little bit off course. So I was gonna try to approach it again today and see if we could actually like figure it out a little bit better without whatever problems we were having last time. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it'd be better if we just got started here.
Okay, cool. Um, so Um, so I guess let's start with some of the easy stuff that we probably do agree on. Which so um, if they were to come up with some cure for autism, and then autistic adults say no to it, they should be able to turn it down. Do we agree on that?
Yep.
Okay, and then likewise, if they say yes to it, I'm not going to assert that they necessarily have a right to the treatment, but I wouldn't want a law in place to stop them. I don't think. I think it should be legally okay for them to seek this treatment if they want it. And I think we're in agreement on that stuff, right?
Yep.
Okay, so then I think where we diverged was when we started talking about what do we do with people who can't communicate consent? So like nonverbal autistic people who aren't able to tell you whether they want the treatment or not.
Well, this might have been a miscommunication we were having because I was talking about like if they were so severely autistic, they literally didn't know the concept of consent.
Okay, do you want to draw a distinction between that versus somebody who can understand it but they just aren't able to tell you?
Yeah, somebody who wouldn't be able to communicate that uh, would have an internal like I want this or I don't want this, whereas somebody who doesn't have that concept in and of itself Like, because when I was talking about severely autistic people, I was talking about the kind of severely autistic where like they have extreme light sensitivity, extreme sound sensitivity. They're just like basically like they're mentally, you know, handicapped to the point where they don't know the concept of consent and essentially like a 4-year old type brain.
Okay, I think I don't want to tie in the sensory problems into this too much because I think somebody could have extreme light or sound sensitivity and still understand consent.
Yeah, I think absolutely, but I think when it comes to like severe autism, like very often the people who like are held back to like a mental level of like a 4-year old, I think very often that stems from a lot of light sensitivity and sound sensitivity where they just aren't capable of interacting with the world in a meaningful way.
Okay. So I guess if you want to treat those two groups differently, we can talk about what do we do with each of them.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so on the one hand, we've got a group um, that is maybe capable of understanding consent and aware of their situation, but just uncommunicative. What do you want to do with those people? Like, would you want to um, I don't know. How do you think the decision would be made, or in your ideal world, about whether or not they get some medical treatment to cure their autism or whatever?
Well, I'd say it would entirely depend. Like, do we have the ability to measure that?
I'm sorry, to measure what?
Like, can we like tell if they are if they actually understand what consent is, and just that they aren't able to communicate it? We know that for sure.
Okay, well, if we can't tell, then I'm not sure what the point of this distinction is, right? Because if you want to treat those two groups differently, I think that has to be predicated on the idea that we can tell the difference between these two groups, right?
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing here. So, if we were able to tell that they understood the concept of consent,
Hmm.
but they weren't able to communicate whether they wanted it or not, I think I would rather them have them go through like some sort of child development counselor and try to get them to the point where they're able to communicate that.
Okay, so try to get them to the point where they're able to communicate that, and then if that fails, then what do you do?
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's a real tough one you brought out
Hmm.
because like I would assume that like at least it would be my assumption that if somebody is experiencing like severely the severe symptoms of like autism, I would assume that person wouldn't want to experience those symptoms anymore. So yeah, I think you would probably try to cure them of that then.
Okay, would you want to leave the decision up to their guardians or whatever? Like, suppose they have a parent that's taking care of them or something like that. Would you want to allow that person to refuse, or would you just want to mandate it?
I think I would leave it up to the parents' discretion.
Okay. So how much discretion do you think the parent or guardian or whatever, how much discretion do you think they should have to make medical decisions for a person like that?
Ah, in this specific case or in general.
Not just in general.
Well, I think it entirely depends on like whether the outcomes are good or bad, really. So like obviously, if the parents shouldn't be able to decide like we're going to cut off your arm today, like I don't think a parent should be able to decide that kind of thing.
Hmm.
I think if it like harms the kid in like any meaningful way, I think we should probably not allow that to be up to the parents' decision.
Okay, so who's figuring out whether it harms the person?
I think
By the way, like I kind of assumed we were talking about adults here because I think there's a whole separate thing with kids, but like I'm imagining like a non-communicative autistic adult who's being cared for by an older parent or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because initially when I was thinking about it, I was thinking more so of like a because like if you wouldn't cure like severe autism like early on when they're kids, I don't think they would ever be able to get up to like any greater mental level aside from getting rid of like the light sensitivity and the sound sensitivity.
Okay. So if they're already an adult, but you would nevertheless have the ability to like cure them and get rid of their symptoms, would you still want to allow that treatment to happen?
So if they were adults and you wanted to get rid of those symptoms,
No,
I
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think in that case I would say that it would probably be up to the caretaker because I think the caretaker would be more likely to like understand the kid better than like anybody else.
Okay, so same thing regardless of whether it's a child or an adult then, right? You just want to leave it up to the caretaker. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So can we go back to the question of like how much discretion does the caretaker have to make medical decisions for this person? Like maybe that's different between children and adults, or no?
Well, I think like you're making the distinction between children and adults, but I don't feel like that's the distinction I would really bring into it. The distinction I would bring is whether or not this person is capable of understanding consent. Like that's essentially like so essentially, like a child cannot understand consent to the degree where they would be able to make that decision, in the same way as somebody who was like severely autistic to the point where they were mentally on the level of like a 4 or 5 year old. That person would also not be able to understand consent.
Okay, so I mean, we've already ruled out the people who are able to communicate consent, like people who can say yes or no to it. We already agree on what to do with those people. So then I guess now we're talking about people who can understand consent but can't communicate it.
Yeah, essentially, I would say that like there's no difference between somebody who's like a 4 year old and somebody who is at the mental level of a 4 year old but has reached the age of majority to me when it comes to like this kind of discussion where we're talking about somebody who isn't able to understand the concept of consent.
Okay, so that would be the person who doesn't understand consent, right? But then there could also be people who do understand it but just aren't able to communicate it, right?
Yeah, and I feel like if we knew that, you would go down the track of trying to get them to, trying to get them through like a child development program to try and get them to the point where they could communicate that.
Yeah, okay, so let me see. So would you want to like have that be a requirement before they're able to get the treatment? Like let's say this person comes in with their guardian. The guardian says like we want to get this treatment for this person. Would you say like, well, hold up, wait, we want to put this person through a course and make sure that they agree to it first? Is that the idea?
Yeah, like if we have a magic like we have like a magic Geiger counter that tells if they can consent, then yeah, I'd say we have to put them through that course.
Okay, I mean, given that we don't have a magic Geiger counter, like how would you want to try to figure out, like to whom do we give this requirement?
Oh, that's a really difficult question because the issue is like this entire discussion exists upon a hypothetical that we
Yeah.
have a magic needle that can pull out the autism.
Yeah, you know what though? I don't think that has to be magic. I mean, it's a little bit far-fetched, right? But you could imagine like there's some crazy breakthrough medical discovery where they find out that there's some super effective treatment for autism. So I don't think we're expecting that to happen, but it's not like so outlandish that I'd be like 100% sure it could never happen.
I suppose. Although I would see it as something that's like very unlikely.
No, yeah, I do too. But okay, like since we're talking, within that hypothetical, and since this hypothetical is similar to a lot of other medical consent situations that do occur in real life, um, there's going to be some amount of people who understand consent but can't communicate it, and so if we want to require those people to have to go through some course to try to um I don't know, to to get them to say yes or no in an informed way to it, but we can't tell who those people are, then do we just make everybody go through that course if they're not able to consent at first, or
I'd say we would probably go in a similar way to how we you know how 12 and 13-year-olds go to like a child psychologist when they're expressing like gender dysphoria, and they go to that psychologist for several years until at some point they're able to make the decision or distinction that this is actually what's happening.
mhm.
So kind of in that same vein, I would think, because if we don't have the magical Geiger counter that tells if somebody can consent, then I think we would have to go down a route where we like make sure in some way, or at least to some degree of probability.
Okay, so let's say we're just gonna put everybody through this course if they're not able to say yes or no for themselves, like if the guardian says yes and then this person um isn't able to speak up and say yes or no to this. Um, would you have that same requirement for other medical decisions that have to be made on this person's behalf?
It depends if it's like a fundamental, like groundbreaking change, because that's what I would consider like this magic autism needle.
Okay, so they don't need to like do a course before they go to the dentist or whatever, right?
No, yeah, I wouldn't say so.
Okay, so if it's a fundamental groundbreaking change, then consent is more important.
Yeah, I think at a certain degree, like if it's some kind of if it's some kind of like serious change like that, then consent might be more important there.
Okay, I think so too. So we're on board with each other so far. Um, okay, so we're gonna put some people through this course. Um, I'm not sure if I want to agree to that, but like let's just go with that hypothetical for now. Like if everybody who's non-communicative is gonna have to go through some kind of course, and we'll try to get them to say yes or no. So then if this course fails, like if they never are able to consent for themselves, um, then do you just allow the guardian to just make any kind of decision they want with regard to that procedure?
I would probably say yes.
Is that also true uh, for other medical procedures too? Like if the I don't know. I don't know how far do you want to extend this.
Yeah, can you give an example?
Okay, sure. So I'll give an example of one um that I probably wouldn't want to allow, right? So like let's say the guardian wants the person to get cosmetic surgery because they want him to look different or something like that, right? And then this person is not able to communicate a yes or no to consent to it. And even after putting them through a course that they don't you can't get them to say yes or no. um, then I think I would not want to allow the guardian to make that kind of a decision.
So what types of cosmetic surgery specifically?
Probably any, like I yeah.
Hmm. So would it be like just entirely cosmetic, or are like partially cosmetic and partially like, you know, there's certain like rhinoplasties to fix like problems with nostrils that affect breathing. Would you consider that to be on the same level?
No, like I'm gonna say that's a different thing, right? So like just some entirely cosmetic procedure. I would not want to allow um, the guardian of an uncommunicative person to be able to put them through that without their consent.
Yeah, sorry, I was responding to Bakel.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah, no problem.
yeah, I would probably agree that we shouldn't be having like cosmetic surgeries on like people who can't consent.
Okay, um, but we're okay with doing like a drastic personality altering procedure on them.
Well, it's both a personality thing. It's also like this will like majorly improve this person's functioning in the world.
But I mean, couldn't you make that same argument for a cosmetic surgery, right? I mean, people do get cosmetic surgeries for that reason sometimes, right? It'll just be like this will improve my quality of life because the way I look affects the way that other people treat me, and it's going to improve my functioning in the world, right?
I would say that like severe autism, where you have like light sensitivity and sound sensitivity, affects your quality of life and the way you interact with the world far differently than just having like a messed up like a cleft palate or maybe like deformed nose or something. Like I think that affects you in a far worse way than like just the cosmetic stuff.
It could. I mean, I don't know. There are people with like pretty crazy like deformities or scars or whatever, right?
Yep. Uh, But I don't think like purely cosmetic. I don't think that would impact your quality of life in the same way as removing like the awful stuff that comes along with like severe autism.
Okay, what if the guardian thinks what if the guardian of this person disagrees with that and they think no, the cosmetic surgery actually is really important and I'm going to do it because it'll help this person's quality of life a lot.
I definitely want I definitely want some type of evaluation where like you know, like an informed like psychologist or an informed like doctor is at least weighing in on that decision very heavily, and they're kind of like the final, you know, the final arbiter of it rather than just the parents themselves.
Okay, so maybe the parent does get to do a cosmetic surgery on a person that doesn't consent to it if a
I
doctor agrees with them.
it would entirely depend on like the outcome of that scenario. Like if it does in fact improve the quality of life to the same degree or at least very close to it of like removing like severe autism from people, then I would say yes. But I don't think that's the case currently.
So you say if it does in fact improve their quality of life, but I think I think it's a problem to even try to frame that as a fact rather than a value judgment.
Oh, I suppose. What exactly are you getting at there?
Well, because if we want to make medical decisions available to certain people or not based on whether it does like air quotes in fact improve their quality of life, um, like you get what I mean by that, like when you're talking about something that isn't a fact, that then essentially like what it's going to come down to is somebody's going to make a value judgment about whether it's going to improve this person's quality of life or not. That's what it's actually going to amount to.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, if we really want to get down to it, everything's really subjective. Like, if we gave somebody like a fully functional bionic leg as opposed to them not having legs, like that's still a subjective measurement of does this improve their quality of life.
It is, and that's that's another scenario where I would want the person to consent or not. consent to it, but before being subjected to the procedure. I
But
wouldn't want to
what
give somebody a bionic leg who can't say that they want it.
I would absolutely disagree with that.
Hmm. Okay. So why is that?
Okay, 'cause I think being able to walk would improve quality of life to such a degree that like just because they can't consent doesn't mean that like we should just let them go around not having legs.
Okay, so how do you decide like which procedures are sufficiently impactful to someone's quality of life where you're just going to do it even if they don't consent to it?
Well, obviously it's a subjective determination, but I feel like on any other issue, I would look at studies for this kind of thing, but I don't think there are currently studies on this type of thing. But if we were going to go down this route where we're doing these kinds of things, I would definitely want like psychologists, social scientists looking into this stuff and giving us the determination of this passes the line of like quality of life.
Okay, but I don't think a study can answer a question about a value judgment because quality of life is not something that's objectively measurable.
But we do build off we do build the subjective value judgment of quality of life based on I think they would be objective measures like does this allow this person to get around more? Are they more capable of doing things by themselves? Those would be like objective determinations that we could make, and then
Hmm.
build off and say that that is a quality of life improvement. So the study wouldn't necessarily tell you your value judgment. The study would give you things to base your value judgment off.
Right. The thing is that there are people who have disabilities in the way that we normally think of it, who actually don't want to get rid of them, right? Like there are deaf people who choose not to get any treatments for their deafness.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, and I imagine, that there might be people who are an amputee, they're missing a leg, and they don't want their leg replaced in the same way that a deaf person doesn't want to be rid of their deafness, right?
I would disagree with that. I think that is far rarer because like when you get into like deafness and they have an entirely different language that they use and there's an entire deaf community. I don't think there's really like is there really a shared culture of amputees?
There's a fetish community of amputees.
Okay, I think that's getting into a I think that's getting into a whole different thing though.
I don't think it is because like if a person is in that fetish community, they might that might be really important to their quality of life, and they might think like um I've got a partner who's really into my amputation, and I don't want a bionic leg because it's going to interfere with my relationship that's really important to me.
Okay, but these people can consent.
Uh, but if they can consent, then that's not the disagreement that we're talking about, right? Because I think we both agree that if a person can say yes or no to a procedure, that we should pretty much let them say yes or no to almost any medical procedure. So I'm assuming that all the scenarios that we're talking about here are for uncommunicative people.
All right, but yeah, but when we were talking about yeah, so I've been awake for so long, and I have like 600 milligrams of caffeine running through me.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think when you brought up the fetish thing, the
Hmm.
reason I said that was a different scenario is because like people who can't communicate consent can't communicate consent to like fetish type stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, fair enough. Like if they're just totally uncommunicative, like across the board, then yeah, that's true. Um, Nevertheless, just the fact that a fetish community like that can exist, shows that there are people who value something that the rest of us might expect to lower their quality of life.
I suppose, but I think for like 99% of like well 99.999% of like people who have had their legs amputated, I think they would choose to have a bionic leg that's fully functional.
I, I think most of them probably would, but 99.999, am I really like so confident that the number of people who would turn that down is like less than 1 in 100,000? Like, no. I
I would personally be that confident.
um okay, on what basis are you that confident?
I'll be honest, I have never been able to find a study on whether or not amputees want their legs back.
Hmm.
But like I've never seen like anybody who didn't have like you've heard of like the body dysphoria or is it body dysmorphia when they want to cut off their legs? Or is it no,
Well,
dysmorphia is not a thing.
no, dysmorphia is a thing, but that's like anorexic people feel like they're overweight when they're not, like that kind of thing. That's body
Oh, okay.
dysmorphia.
So if you wanted to cut off your leg, that would be dysphoria.
Well, okay, so dysphoria really just means feeling bad about something.
I suppose, but I think when you're talking about dysphoria, it's not so much feeling bad about something, but an incongruence with how you would like to see yourself with how you actually are that causes like marked distress.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's not really like the literal meaning of dysphoria, though.
Are we talking like the literal like Latin roots or the medical meaning?
The I mean both.
I'm googling
It's
this.
Greek, but yeah. So dysmorphia has to do with being dissatisfied with your like physical appearance and stuff. Um, Dysphoria, it really just means feeling bad.
Okay, yep. Mood characterized by generalized discontent and agitation. So you would be correct.
Yeah. So you were trying to relate that to amputees or something? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm talking about like you've seen like interviews with there was at least one person I know who was documented to have like videotaped. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube where this person cut off their leg because they really wanted to. They really saw themselves as an amputee and they
Hmm.
didn't like the fact that they had a leg.
Okay, so there you have an example of somebody, wanting something very different for their life than what you would expect if you were to make a prediction on their behalf for what their quality of life would be, right?
Yeah, but I think that would be like one example out of like the 0.11% of what I was saying.
Okay, I don't understand how you can be that confident about it when one, you've said, you have no statistical evidence or studies on this, and two, you actually know a person who's a counterexample of this.
Well, it's pretty much a counterexample for everything.
Yeah, I know, but if you know a counterexample, like it's not just that a counterexample exists. It's that it's found among the set of people that you know. It is an indication of how common or uncommon it might be, right?
Oh, I suppose. But
And
I feel like if I look on the internet long enough, I could probably find somebody who doesn't want to have a brain.
yeah, sure. But this person that you know, you probably didn't go looking for a person who wanted to amputate their limb. You just came across them without looking for them.
Yeah, it was recommended on YouTube. People wanted to see it.
Oh, I see. Okay, I was under the impression that this was somebody you knew in real life. Maybe I misunderstood.
Oh yeah, I was saying like there's like a documentary on this person.
Oh, okay. Um, I mean, I've definitely talked to autistic people who say that they would not want to get rid of their autism, right? And and we've already agreed that they shouldn't have to if they don't if if they decide to say no to it.
Yeah, this is the kind of the problem I have with it is like having it on like autism spectrum disorder,
Hmm.
because like you got high functioning autistic people who just kind of have like a different way of viewing the world and a different way of interacting with society, and then you have like low functioning autistic people who like lack pretty much all ability to interact with society and take care of themselves. And
Hmm.
I don't like the fact that that's on a spectrum like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's of course this isn't something that's super well understood, so it could be that those aren't even the same thing, right? Like they might not even be degrees of severity of the same thing. They might just be different things that we're categorizing together.
Yeah, so essentially what I'm talking about, like the severely limited people, I'm thinking that's more of like a medical condition that you need to treat that, because like those people are in a lot of distress like every day.
Um, so there's definitely some medical procedures that I would agree that you can do with a person who doesn't consent, right? Suppose somebody gets injured and gets knocked unconscious. I think you can give medical treatment to that person even while they're unconscious, and that's an example of somebody not needing to consent to a medical procedure. I mean, I think we probably agree on that one, right?
Yeah, I'd agree on that.
um but I think somebody being unconscious doesn't give you license to just do any medical procedure on them, right? It's not um like if I get knocked unconscious and then I wake up and they've done cosmetic surgery on me, it would be ridiculous, and I don't. We want to allow that. Or have we agreed on that too?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So then, at some point, it's just like how much do we care um, about the similarity of autism to being like a severe and untreatable mental problem, um, as a more akin um, to like an injury where you get knocked unconscious. Like how much do we want to compare it to that versus how much do we want to compare it to to a just elective cosmetic surgery?
The issue I have is that like I view it as something that would be like far more like improving that person's quality of life over like a cosmetic issue. So essentially, like if somebody was in like a permanent coma, well, not necessarily permanent. Let's say they wake up in 10 years. I would say that like the consent is transferred over to whatever doctor is taking care of them to make sure that like they aren't in like horrible condition when they finally wake up.
Hmm. But if you want to leave the decision in the hands of the guardian, then it really doesn't even matter whether you think that's an improvement to their quality of life. It matters instead whether the guardian thinks that that's an improvement to their quality of life.
Yeah, because the person who is being guarded wouldn't really be able to make that distinction, would they?
Well, I mean, I agree they can't, but I think that the fact that they can't, um, basically means that we just shouldn't do a lot, like most medical procedures on them because they can't consent to it. Like I think if the guardian thinks that cosmetic surgery is going to improve this person's quality of life, but the person can't agree to it, that then I would want to tell them, no, you can't do that.
Well, it would. I think it would entirely depend on like what do we have that says that this improves quality of life, at least to like our like the basic shared standards that we have.
But under the system you're describing, those don't even really matter, right? Because if you just want to leave their medical decisions up to their caretaker entirely, then it's up to the caretaker whether they care about the shared standards, right?
I don't think I would be in favor of saying like the caretaker can just decide to do whatever.
Okay, so then we get back to the question that I was asking like half an hour ago. Like what are the limits on what the caretaker can do or not?
Well, the limits are on basically like whether like we as a society, we as our medical professionals, whether we have decided that something is so important as to improve quality of life to a considerable degree, where basically we have this cutoff line. So essentially, I wouldn't say that cosmetic surgery would rise to that degree because I don't think that's quite as backed as other major medical procedures that we definitely would.
Um, I wonder if that's true. So when you say it, like I don't think that's backed. Like in what way do you mean that?
Essentially, let's say somebody needs like a bypass because their heart stopped working.
Hmm.
Like obviously that would improve their quality of life, right?
I actually don't know whether it would or not, but I'd want to do it regardless.
Wait, well, if they don't die, then that probably improves their quality of life.
Yeah, I don't want to assume that them not dying improves their quality of life, though.
I mean, if you're dead, you don't really have a quality of anything, do you?
Yeah, but that could be better or worse, right?
I get what you're saying, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like I think we should, um, want to do life-saving procedures on people who can't consent to it, and I don't think quality of life should be the measure for that.
Okay, so you would be a proponent of like assisted suicide?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so essentially you would want to save that person because you don't know if they want to die or they want to live. So you go with the default, which is that most people want to live. So you would try to get them to a point where they can express that desire to you.
Um, and I don't think they need to express that desire to me. If they want to live or not live, they can. Like I don't think we should really factor that into their decision because even a person who I expect to never be able to describe that to me, I'd still want to do the life saving procedure on them. So, like for example, an uncommunicative autistic person who has never spoken a word in their life um, is never going to be able to get to the point where they're going to tell me that they want to live or die. Nevertheless, if they get you know if they have a heart attack, I think we should treat them like anybody else who has a heart attack.
Yeah, you would default to most people want to live, so we'll try to keep this person living.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
But if you got them, like let's say we just have a person who can communicate and they have a heart attack, so they're incapable of communicating at that point,
Yeah.
then we would default to they probably want to live. But then if we get them to a point where they can express that desire, if they decide they want to die, we would let them die.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And people can have like do not resuscitate orders and such. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I completely and utterly forgot. Like, where did we? I forgot how this relates.
Okay, so we were talking about examples of where it's okay to do a medical procedure on somebody without their consent,
Oh, yep, yep.
and I think it seems like we're both okay with doing a life saving procedure on somebody who's knocked unconscious,
Yep.
right? And it sounds like I don't know. Like on the cosmetic surgery thing, I'm definitely not okay with it, but it sounds like I don't know. Initially, you kind of said you would not be okay with it, but then like it sounded like you said it might be like contingent on what's the evidence for cosmetic surgery improving people's quality of life or something like that. Is that right?
Well, I'd say it's a certain kind of threshold you have to meet where quality of life becomes more important than consent. So, for example, let's take a major depressive disorder for example. Let's say somebody has major depressive disorder
Hmm.
and they are currently suicidal. Should we
Hmm.
let that person commit suicide, or should we try to treat that? Because depression is like a disorder of the mind where it specifically makes your thoughts irrational to the point where it overrides like the basic human desire to live. So,
The problem to me with describing that it makes your thoughts irrational is that I think people's thoughts are normally irrational. I don't think that's an aberration. I think that's the norm. Um,
uh,
I think if someone wants to refuse treatment for depression, I think they should be able to refuse treatment. Yeah.
well, essentially, I would disagree with your description of people as irrational, uh, because like you can work off a rational basis even if your rationale is bad, right?
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Do you think that this is probably a really bad example, but do you think like the Nazis were irrational?
No, I don't think anyone is.
But didn't you just say that you think most people have irrational thoughts?
Have irrational thoughts? Yeah, I think that that's normally how people are. Yeah.
Okay, so you think most people go around and they're thinking irrational thoughts.
I think literally everyone does that. Yes, I think that's just how our brains work.
Can you describe what you would see as like rational versus irrational?
Um, no, I can't. Nevertheless, I think by almost any definition of irrational, this is true. Because essentially, what your brain is doing is just generating thoughts in a pretty haphazard manner all the time. And it's more or less random noise informed by memory data.
All
Like,
right, so
sorry, go ahead.
let me give you an example.
Hmm.
All right, so let's say I go into work one day and it seems like everybody's ignoring me.
Hmm.
Rationally, based on that evidence, I can assume two types of things. I can assume everybody suddenly hates me for some reason, even though I can't think of a reason why they would hate me, or I can just assume that it's just kind of a shitty day for everybody. One of those would be a rational thought, and one of those would be more so an irrational thought. So, like a person with major depressive disorder would probably start thinking things like, "Oh, everybody hates me. I'm a piece of shit human being. I'm dragging people down," based on just like random things that occurred to them. Whereas a rational thought would be like, "Oh, it must be a shitty day for everybody."
Yeah, I think those are both irrational. I don't think you have enough evidence to conclude either of those things. So there, this is one of the reasons why I don't think we can hold people to a standard where where in order to have informed consent to something you have to be thinking rationally because it just isn't the case that people are thinking rationally in their normal everyday lives, right? This is kind of like when people say that that the reason they don't want to allow children to vote or allow children to make their own medical decisions is because they don't fully understand the consequences of their actions. I don't think that's a viable standard either because adults also don't fully understand the consequences of their actions. Also can't do informed consent if we held them to that same standard.
I don't think you have to be like entirely and utterly rational, but just that your mindset generally defaults to a rational viewpoint. Because when I say rational, basically what that means is like when you see certain indicators or indicators of evidence out in the world, you default to a more probabilistic outcome rather than going with like some kind, like you have some type of filter over everything you think that turns it into like one of the most uncommon possible examples of everything.
Hmm. Okay, so I'm in a philosophy reading group where we're we're interestingly enough, I'm gonna meet you could go meet with them in just a few minutes when I I'm supposed to go in about 10 minutes to meet with them. The book we're reading is about rationality right now. So even though I don't have like a personal definition of rationality, I can tell you like what the book says.
Wait, what book is it and who wrote it?
It's it's like Rationality from AI to Zombies by Eliezer Yudkowsky or something. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. He's like an
Hmm.
artificial intelligence researcher. So anyway, the way he defines rationality, he puts it into two buckets. So he talks about epistemic rationality, which he says is having strategies that succeed in aligning your beliefs with reality is basically what he calls epistemic rationality. And then he has instrumental rationality, which is like behaving in ways that make sense according to your goals. I don't think he doesn't word it exactly like that, but hopefully you get what I mean, right? Like behaving in ways that are likely to get you to succeed at your goals. And so it's essentially if you have patterns of thought that are generally successful at aligning your beliefs with reality and with and at getting you to achieve your goals, then that's what this person would call rationality, right?
I'd say I'd say that's a decent definition, although I'd say like rationality is more so like working off like a baseline kind of logical type. Hey,
Well, that is what he means when he says epistemic rationality, right? When he says patterns of thought that are likely to align your beliefs with rationality, like he means using things like logic and empiricism um, are likely to align your beliefs with reality. So you
yeah,
know,
I'd agree with that definition then. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm kind of a little more mixed on it. When you said like I can't remember verbatim exactly what you said, but something like you had a mixed reaction to that definition. You thought it was just okay. That's where I'm at with that definition too, which is why I don't produce that definition when you ask me for my own definition of rationality. But it's it's one that we could at least work with, and it's one by which people in general are not rational.
Uh,
because,
let, let, let me give you an example real quick, and I think this is a good example. Let's say that everybody in a town
Mhm,
is saying that like gasoline prices are going to go up by $10 tomorrow. Would
mhm.
a person going out to get gasoline for their car today, would that be a rational decision?
It could be. I mean, it's going to depend on what that person's goals are and whether they have good reason to believe that. Well, actually, it might not even depend on whether they have good reason to believe what other people are telling them. It's mostly just going to be an instrumental function of like what is it that they're hoping to achieve.
I think essentially I would say that based on the premise that like everybody is telling you gasoline is going to be $10 more expensive tomorrow, and the fact that like you don't want to spend more money on gasoline, I think it would be rational for you to go out and get gasoline, even if you end up being incorrect and gasoline is actually $2 less expensive tomorrow. You would still have made a rational decision based on the evidence that was before you. You
Yeah,
may not
I
have
don't
gotten
agree
all the
with that because I don't want to endorse the idea that it's rational to just believe whatever people tell you, even if everybody's telling you the same thing.
well, you know how like in economics, they always talk about a rational actor.
Yeah, I've got a big problem with that as well.
I think we have I think we have a baseline foundational disagreement on that. Then,
This is a thing that I would love to talk with you more about sometime, but actually I've got to go because I've got my reading group to meet with in just a few minutes. But thank you for hanging out and having this conversation with me.
yeah, yeah. I wish you would have told me you were putting on the camera. I would have put on my camera for you, but I literally just alt tabbed like a second ago and saw you had your camera on.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm streaming it, right? So, um, I always go on camera on stream, or almost always anyway. But
Yeah, well, I enjoyed talking with you.
yeah, yeah, I pretty much always enjoy talking with you too. So, anyway, have a good day.
Yep, you too.